Hello everyone, welcome to Gelbergs and Data Basics Secure Your 2017 webinar. I'm Jane Johnson, I'm an employment lawyer and I will be dealing with the employment element of the talk later on. But first of all, I will hand you over to Kelly Peters, who is our data protection rock star, to take you through the first part of the presentation. If you have any questions, please just ping them over to us and we will try our best to answer them either during the presentation or at the end. Okay.
Thanks, Jane. Hello, my name is Kelly Peters, and as Jane said, I am a data rock star. I am the co-founder of Data Basics with 16 years experience working within public sector and commercial organisations. Data Basics is an Oxfordshire-based business, and we work with large and small businesses who are concerned that they may not be fully compliant with the Data Protection Act, who acknowledge that they have not invested in training their staff on data protection, and who have yet to start planning for the general data protection regulation that comes into force in 2018. I'm incredibly passionate about bringing people and data together, and today my focus of the presentation will be to raise awareness of the data protection risks associated with using social media in a business. If you want to know more about Data Basics, please go to our website www.dbxuk.com. Firstly, I always like to put a bit of context around the Data Protection Act, in particular how old it is. And I have to say, some of these bullet points actually make me feel a little older than I would like to admit. I don't like to accept that France won the World Cup in 1998, but that is a fact. Saving Private Ryan and Armageddon were the top two movies, but I'm certainly a big fan of ER and Friends. But more importantly, back in the late 1990s, very few households had a PC. Very few households had a mobile phone. Social media didn't exist. There was no online banking, and there certainly wasn't any cloud computing. Today, as you can see from the slide, 85% of us have a PC and potentially more than one in the home. 94% of us have a mobile phone, and I'll guarantee you that the folks at work have more than one of those mobile devices. It is important to note that at the moment there is no specific regulation around social media, which is why we want to talk to you about data protection and employment law and how it affects social media. So what is the Data Protection Act? In my experience, I have found that whilst the majority of business people have heard of the Data Protection Act, many simply do not understand the regulation, the risks, or the potential penalties. At the core of the Data Protection Act is about ensuring that the processing of personal data is done so in accordance with the 8 guiding principles, and I will come on to these in a little while. So what is personal data? This is the information such as full name, date of birth, postal address, as well as sensitive information. Now, some of you will be collecting information on mental and physical health, membership of trade unions, potentially sexuality. So it is incredibly important that we protect this to the best of our ability. I know that I would not want information about me to be handled poorly and as such had a negative impact on my life. As business people, I believe that we have a responsibility to our staff, customers and investors, potentially members of the public who are funding our charities, to ensure that personal information is not misused and it does not fall into the wrong hands. And you only need to switch on the TV or look at social media to realise that it is mishandled on a daily basis by companies large and small. So my plea, if there's one and one that you take away from today, is that you treat your access to your business's data as a privilege and not a right. So why should the Data Protection Act be important to you? To me, understanding the Data Protection Act and being compliant are pretty fundamental to their business's success. Did you know in the last 5 years, 97% of businesses in the UK have experienced a data breach. That means that most of you on this call would have been affected by a data protection breach. That's pretty shocking. 93% of these are due to human error. Whilst we hear about the technological aspect, it will be one of us that has made the mistake. We have to accept that we make mistakes. However, we can put things in place to prevent that. Now, those risks that you are faced with are reputation damage. You could incur a substantial fine, and at the moment, the current fine is up to £500,000. It could also cause trust from employees and investors and customers to downgrade. The Information Commissioner last year produced a report that suggested that only 1 in 5 of people actually trusted businesses with their data. So we have an incredibly hard battle to be able to produce high quality data that is protected. Ask yourself, can you afford a fine of up to £500,000? Can you cope with the financial loss or damage of your reputation? I'd simply ask you to look at TalkTalk. They were fined £400,000 in October last year. That's an incredible amount of money. But more shockingly, they actually reported that the cost of the actual breach was £66 million in lost business. I know that we couldn't cope with that, could you? So some fun statistics. As a data rock star, I always like to share some fun facts. The population of the globe is massive, 7.2 billion, of which there are 3 billion active internet users. That's pretty phenomenal. Of which 2 billion have active social media accounts. And that's not just one social media account. They will be on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and all the other various social media that has popped up in the last 10 years. The rise of social media since the beginning of the millennium, and that's how young this platform is, has been truly phenomenal. Social media is now at the forefront of today's world and is used by most in one form or another. There are benefits, no doubt, and risks associated with social media and its use in the corporate setting. And in my opinion, it should be managed and controlled, not prevented. So since 2002, social media has grown at a staggering pace. LinkedIn was only formed in 2002. Facebook followed in 2004 and Twitter launched in 2006. Yet most of us talk about these in our work life. And according to the Millennial Impact Report, millennials spend 4.2 hours per day on social networking, which is phenomenal. So if you think about the risk, we do have a significant risk to manage to ensure that personal information is not released on a social media platform. And by 2025, which is sadly not too far away, millennials will make up 75% of the workforce. So it's in our best interest to understand how to use social media properly so that we don't breach the Data Protection Act. So again, some fun facts. I mentioned on the previous slide that 93% of breaches are caused by human error. That means we have an amazing opportunity to educate our staff and ourselves to reduce the number of risks that actually occur. We have to ask ourselves, why would we not want to embrace social media? The vast majority of data protection breaches are caused by human error. However, like I said, they can be prevented. If a business, we have not provided any guidance and support for our staff on appropriate use of social media and data protection, then we are at fault. Today, many phishing scams, and I'm sure you have experienced a phishing scam, are incredibly sophisticated because the hackers will look at social media profiles to obtain key information to use against us. Now, how many of you, and maybe not you, but your friends and family, put their entire life on social media? From that, people can get information to scam you where you could lose money from your business and potentially ruin your reputation. As I've said, social media platforms provide employees with an amazing opportunity to instantaneously tweet, post, or send comments from almost anywhere without any safeguards to vet the communication. A little scary. Therefore, there's a greater risk of saying something silly in real time and it being shared amongst your followers and then their followers beyond. Of course, this entirely depends on how popular you are on social media. If you only have a few following, then the risk may be small. However, if as an organisation you have thousands of followers, just think how quickly that breach of personal information could cost you. So, a few fun facts about the Data Protection Act. There are 8 guiding principles of the Act, of which I strongly believe you should each be familiar with when processing personal data. So very quickly. 1, you must have legitimate grounds for collecting and using personal data. So you have to process personal data to process your payroll. Without a name, bank details and address, you're unlikely to be able to successfully do that. In terms of specific purpose, you need to be clear about why you are collecting personal data and what you intend to do with it. If you don't have that, question why you are collecting it, please. 3, adequate. You need to really ensure that the personal data you collect is relevant and not excessive. I have been into a number of businesses where they simply feel that they should collect everything that's ever been asked of their customers. They'll never use it. Therefore, in my opinion, don't collect it. As an example, I know if I was going to check in to a hotel, and this may sound really silly, I would expect someone to ask me for my credit card, my name to confirm who I am, and my postal address. I certainly would not want them to ask me about my mental health status. In terms of accuracy, you really should always aim to collect good quality data and ensure that it is maintained and kept up to date. If you were to post inaccurate information in social media, again, you would be at fault within the regulation. So spend the time to correct your inaccurate data. In terms of retention, and again, I've experienced this in a number of organisations, we simply want to hold on to personal data forever, and it's simply not the case. Therefore, please review how long you hold your personal data. If it's no longer needed, have a plan on how to dispose. Every individual has the right to access their data. So if you receive a subject access request, you need to be able to demonstrate what you hold on them and if they come back to you and tell you it's inaccurate, please do respond. Obviously, and my main focus will be on information security, which I'll focus on a little bit more in the next section. And 8, sending data outside of the economic European area. With the likes of the cloud, this becomes very important. Your cloud solution may be sending data outside of Europe. Do you know that? How do you know? Have you ever asked the question, where is your data physically held? Of course, I might add, if you have any questions throughout this presentation, please do ask them away. And like I said, we'll try and answer them as quickly as possible. So, fun facts about Principle 7. Most breaches will occur because of an information security breach. They'll be hacked, there'll be poor password management. It happens. As I mentioned, it's your duty under the Data Protection Act to keep personal information secure. Cyber attacks against organisations are increasingly common, unfortunately. You only had to read the news yesterday to realise that Royal and Sun Alliance were fined $150,000 under this principle because of a bad data protection breach. Personal data is an incredibly valuable asset for your business. Therefore, appropriate measures must be taken against unauthorized access and unlawful processing of personal data. Do you know what measures you have in place? Are your laptops encrypted? Do you have password protection on your computers? Things to consider. Do you know what the passwords are for your social media corporate accounts? Do everyone have access to them? So, if you're using social media for your corporate purposes, which I imagine that you are, do ensure that you know who in the organisation has access to that corporate account. Make sure they understand what controls should be in place in terms of what messages can be shared, because you do need to communicate with your customers, and social media is an amazing platform for that. Provide guidance to ensure they know how. I truly don't believe that by banning social media is the answer to your questions. Embrace it, just provide really good guidelines and training on good and bad practice. Remember, as I said at the very beginning of this presentation, we all have mobile phones, so we don't just have to manage social media between 9 till 5 on train journeys home. If we have a little bit of a rant or we're unhappy, it is very easy to tweet 140 characters about how unhappy we are or how unhappy we are about a particular individual in our organisation. What I want to quickly raise your attention of, and something I've seen more recently, is that employers are starting to use social media as a way of vetting employees. I'm not suggesting for a second that this is a bad thing. However, where you do intend to vet applicants, can you please let them know that this is going to be part of your process? Give the candidate an opportunity to comment on the accuracy of any findings that you do find, and please, the search should be undertaken as late in the recruitment process as is possible. And the final slide from me before I hand over to Jane to talk about the employment aspects is that whilst there is no specific act about social media, you really should have a social media policy. I would hope that you have a data protection policy, but definitely invest the time in developing a social media policy. A social media policy will make it clear to employees what is expected of them in terms of social media. It will make them aware of the use of social media and the disciplinary actions that could be taken if an employee's conduct breaches such policies. Educate, please educate, educate, educate. I can't say enough how important it is to train. Today, citizens publish a significant amount of information. You saw in an earlier slide that over 3 billion people have access to social media. So it's not surprising that hackers can use information from social media profiles to create phishing scams. So please tell your staff what they should and shouldn't be doing. Privacy notice. If you are collecting information through websites, make sure your privacy notice is very easy to find on your website and you are very clear about what you're collecting, why you're collecting it, how you're collecting it, and for what purpose. They have the right to see that policy. And obviously, during the course of their employment, employees may become privy to personal information about clients or third parties. It absolutely must be made clear to employers that any such information must not be broadcast via social media, regardless of how upset they may be in a particular scenario. If they do publish information, it must be with the consent of that customer, investor, or employee. And finally, before I hand over to Jane, my final plea is please, please, please have more than one password for your social media accounts. I know way too many people that have one password for everything. This includes accessing their banking details, accessing their online social media account, and they use the same passwords for work. Please, 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 can you have more than one password? That is my final rant on passwords. I will now hand over to Jen. So bear with me a moment whilst I change the slide deck.
Thanks very much, Kelly. So I'm Jane Johnson. I'm an employment associate at Gelbergs. Gelbergs has been established over 50 years. The employment team has been here almost 6 years. I've been here from the beginning. We deal with employers and employees from everything from recruitment to dismissal and everything in between. The above slides just show you what else we can do here at Gelbergs. So what am I going to talk to you about today? Managing social media risk. So the issues of having a connected workforce, key concerns you might have in relation to that. I'll take you through some fairly humorous social media cases. We'll talk about managing risk, and then ideally what should be in your policy and your procedures. So there's a picture of Mark Zuckerberg for you. It's crazy to think that only 17 years ago, less than 1% of us used the internet. Now it's an integral part of our home and working lives. Most business owners want to use the internet to help them grow their business, and that obviously includes the use of social media. Social media has become a prevalent tool airing one's thoughts and emotions, sometimes including dirty laundry, and often without considering the consequences. This can include discussion about cats, friends, partners, parents, and most importantly for you, their workplace. So today I'll be focusing on measures to limit damage by your employees to your business, whether this is through their use of social media at home or at work. So who are Generation Y? Also called millennials, and Kelli touched on that as well. I'm going to talk a bit about Generation Y, partly because, as Kelli also said, they're the fastest growing segment of today's workforce, and they also form a large part of your client or customer markets. As firms compete for available talent and the market for goods and services becomes ever more competitive, businesses can't ignore the needs, desires, and attitudes of this vast sector of the population. Generation Ys or millennials are usually around age 16 to 25. Tech savvy, almost verging on addiction, they are connected 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're confident, ambitious, and not afraid to question authority. And almost unlimited access to information means they expect transparency both from big businesses and from their own employers. They're willing to trade higher pay for flexible schedules and a better work-life balance, which includes access to technology, digital and social media at work. The lines are now more blurred than ever between work and home life. I must point out, it's not just younger people who are verging on addicted to technology. My 70-year-old mother-in-law is surgically attached to her iPad. Key concerns. So what are your key concerns about this as a business? Well, lack of productivity is a big one. The average person looks at their phone 85 times a day, and that can go up to 135 depending on your age bracket. WhatsApp and instant messaging has made the workplace even more distracting. There's also exposure to infections such as spyware or viruses, leaking of information and data protection issues, as Kelly's discussed with you. CyberRoam, who's a network security company, wanted to see what they could find out about a company from their employees' private social media accounts. And from searches of public information, they discovered cash flow problems, staff looking for employment elsewhere, premature broadcast of events and product launches, financial information, sales target information, and senior management departures. This can be a huge liability for you. Such disclosure of information, together with social media blunders, which we'll be looking at next, can seriously affect your business's reputation. And let's not forget that trolling or bullying and discriminatory comments on emails between staff can occur too. Cases. So I'm going to be looking at two cases, and one didn't go to a tribunal, but is a third example. We'll be looking at where did the employees go wrong, where did the companies go wrong, what did the companies do about it, did they handle it well. We'll discuss some real life examples. I want you to think about what you would do in the same situation. Please feel free to ping over your ideas to us. Please look away now if you're offended by swearing. This is the case of Trusler and B&Q, and this exchange was on Facebook. Trusler is T, J is his friend who also works there. I'll just give you a couple of seconds to have a quick read through that. Mr. Trusler works in the Northampton B&Q store as a customer advisor for 4 years, from the age of 17 onwards. He was asked by his manager to complete a task in 2 days on his own, which he thought was an unreasonable instruction given in an unreasonable manner. After his shift, he posted this rant. The postings were reported to management by a colleague. B&Q had a social networking policy, and it stated that on Facebook, employees should not make derogatory, defamatory, rude, threatening, or insulting comments about the company, its product, services, the brand, their workplace, or any managers, colleagues, suppliers, or other business partners. So it's pretty well covered. And they should not use blogs or social networking sites to discuss internal issues or concerns, but should raise them with the manager. And if they breach this, they would be subject to the disciplinary procedure. Mr. Trusler said he had never been given a copy of the policy or staff handbook which had it in there. B&Q said there was a copy in his manager's office, and it was also available on the staff intranet. Mr. Trusler insisted he'd only ever seen the policy during the disciplinary process and not before, but he did accept that his behaviour was in breach of that policy. He explained that he was just letting off steam after work, having been very stressed by his manager's request, and it had wound him up. He was not serious in his threats. If you see, he used LOL and LMAO, which is laughing my ass off, and that he had just had a bad day at work. He had a clean disciplinary record up to this point. What do you think happened, and what would you do? Feel free to message us now. Would you have dismissed him, or would you have given him another chance? Well, he was dismissed. He claimed unfair dismissal in the tribunal, and he won. The tribunal said it was not reasonable for B&Q to decide that his actions were a threat to the business. However, because Mr. Trusler did not show any remorse or the full appreciation of his actions, and his comments would be read by 45 to 50 people who would know that they related to B&Q, he was 50% responsible for his own dismissal, and his damages were reduced by that percentage. Okay, this is the case of Dante's Inferno, Mr. Weeks versus Everything Everywhere, so EE. I'll read these out, it's quite funny. Another day at Dante's, fat lad living the dream. Hope you all have a better day than I'm going to have. Hope you'll have a better day than what I'm going to have in my 12 hours in Dante's. Think I'll have a stroll in the sun, beats the heat of Dante's Inferno. Dante's awaits me, what a downer, 12 hours of love and mirth. 12-hour stint in a row in the Inferno has me cream crackered. No Dante's Inferno for this happy party today. 12 hours in the Inferno, dampen the spirit. B5, both bum, 12 hours in Dante's to come. Everything Everywhere Limited, EE, employed Mr. Weeks as a customer service advisor. They had a social media policy which warned not to make posts that damage EE's reputation or be viewed as bullying and harassment. Mr. Weeks frequently made Facebook posts that likened E to Dante's classical portrayal of hell. One of his colleagues, Mr. Lynn, reported these comments to his line manager, who formally warned Mr. Weeks to stop posting in this manner. Mr. Weeks refused and said that it was his private life. After receiving the warning, Mr. Weeks made posts which Miss Lynn found threatening. For example, he posted, "It saddens me that people request to be your friend and then stab you in the back. I'm a big believer in karma, what goes around comes around, and no more words from me, next it's action." Ms. Lynn felt intimidated and feared repercussions from Mr. Weeks. She asked to park at the front of the building in plain view, and on one occasion she was found sobbing at her desk. What would you do? Would you dismiss him, would you discipline him, or would you let him carry on? I'm sure you wouldn't. Well, he was dismissed and he lost at tribunal. It just shows that these cases are very much, they turn on the facts of each scenario. It is quite hard to find a precedent. But the point here was The tribunal said that employees just don't seem to appreciate that private, in inverted commas, online conduct is never actually private. And there's no reason why employers should treat misuse of social media differently to any other form of misconduct. They were entitled to dismiss due to the potential reputational damage caused by Mr. Weeks' post, and in any case, his later posts constituted bullying towards Mrs. and justified dismissal. The next one, you might have seen this one. This is on LinkedIn, which, as I'm sure you're aware, is a business website, social media website. This is a recent event. So the solicitor on the left, Alexander Cart-Silk, sent a message via LinkedIn to the human rights barrister on the right, Charlotte Proudman. He said, "Charlotte, delighted to connect. I appreciate this is probably horrendously politically incorrect, but that is a stunning picture. You definitely win the prize for the best LinkedIn picture I've ever seen. Always interested to understand people's skills and how we might work together, Alex." Charlotte responded with, "Alex, I find your message offensive. I am on LinkedIn for business purposes, not to be approached about my physical appearance or to be objectified by sexist men. The eroticization of women's physical appearance is a way of exercising power over women. It silences women's professional attributes as their physical appearance becomes a subject. Unacceptable and misogynistic behaviour. Think twice before sending another woman, half your age, such a sexist message, Charlotte." Charlotte then posted the exchange on Twitter, and it hit the headlines. Journalists started digging into her background and his other online activity. And people posted comments both in favour of her taking a stance and others branding her feminazi. It all got very nasty. Alex's firm posted a public apology, and he's kept a low profile since. Well, what do you think that they should have done there? How far will they go to support him? We've got here, somebody said sack him. Well, actually, they didn't, and he's still working there as head of European intellectual property. So he was obviously of more value to them than without them. Fortunately, that's the way of the world. Next, so how have businesses reacted? Well, there's been a lot of knee-jerk reactions. Coca-Cola doesn't allow any staff to post a single piece of content on any of its social media networks until they've completed the company's social media certification program. Apple have a social media policy that's for staff which is almost as thick as a Bible. Has this been successful? With the launch of smartphone devices in the UK, access to digital has become almost impossible to totally control. And in parallel, social media has become a key part of a company's marketing strategy, meaning that many employees actually need to access social media in order to do their job. So you can't ignore it. Managing employees' use of social media. How are you going to do this? Well, common sense, really. Mutual respect between the employee and the employer, and only go as far as necessary. There's some tips now on what you should include in your policies or guidelines, procedures and standards. Make it positive, more about do's and don'ts. Encourage staff awareness for them to take responsibility for what they say online, to share their opinions without being offensive. Make sure that staff know you will monitor their use of social media. This is really important because it acts as a deterrent. It's also a tool for catching out who did something stupid so you can take appropriate action. Educate staff, as Kelly said, about confidentiality and copyright. Educate them about data protection, and make sure that they know by sharing confidential information or bringing the company into disrepute, they risk losing their jobs. Having a policy so employees understand their obligations will go towards protecting your business and helping you enforce it. What should my policy include? It should include guidance on network security, on internet and email use, on social network sites and blogging, on smartphones and device rules, on data protection, and most importantly, that a breach of this policy will be subject to disciplinary action. Communicate the policy. As I echo Kelly here, you have to educate the staff, you have to train them. If they don't know what they're signing or they don't know what they're bound by, but you can't really enforce it. So have a dialogue with them, have a training session with them, and at the end, get them to sign a piece of paper, if you like, that says, I understand the session, I attended and I understand. Stick it on the personnel file, and there's your ammunition. So looking forward, we don't know how technology will change, but we will we'll be certain that it will. And alongside that, so will society, the workforce, and the way we work. Keep things under review. That's me. That's our details. Our website's there. Twitter is @Gelbergs. And please link in with me, but only if you like my picture, of course. I must apologise if there's been any poor connection due to the rain. I'm just going to have a look at some questions we have here. Some long ones. Somebody has written, where could they get access to a social media policy? From me. We can help you draft any policies we can make it as simple or as complicated. Well, maybe complicated is the wrong word. We get it to suit every business's needs. I think also if you're part of a startup hub or anything like that, if you have some kind of subscription to these hubs, and they're everywhere. There's at least one in Islington, and there's another one down the road near us. Then they also help you with these kind of things. You can probably get access on a slightly less expensive level than using a solicitor. But that's really, I would not download anything online and just use it for your business, because it needs to be specific to your business's needs, and it needs to understand what your objectives are, and that's just, it's not going to do what you need it to.
And I'd absolutely echo what Jane is saying. An earlier point that was raised from the group was that Google, to many, is the answer. It simply isn't. Whilst it's very easy to get a response from Google, it doesn't necessarily meet your needs as an organisation. So it is worth investing the time in understanding what it is you want and why you want it. When you're developing any type of policy, you could be found at fault if you don't even understand the policy you've downloaded. And they're too easy. Anything that is free is unlikely to really meet your needs. And if you haven't spent the time, but certainly invest in your staff. Make sure they understand what you can and cannot do. I go into too many businesses where I ask the question, have you ever been trained on data protection? And they look at me as like, well, no, I don't even know what the Data Protection Act is. So to think that they have read a social media policy, they even look at me more astounded.
Yeah. I think it's such a minefield that people bury their head, don't
Absolutely.
they? Sorry, I'm just looking through other questions we have here. Right, sorry. Somebody has said, Josh, I'm going to come back to you separately, because this is quite a long question, and probably better to have a chat over the phone or email. That seems to be all the questions we have. If anyone else has anything else they'd like to add, then please let me know. Just being given some more questions here. Yeah, I think I've looked through those.
I saw the comment about being a librarian and being asked to complete people's essays. I have to say that I'm not, I should be surprised by that, but I'm not. If people go to Google, I'm really not surprised that they would go to someone else that's vastly more knowledgeable than Google for advice / writing the policy document essay for them.
Also, somebody's asked, the rise of social media has unfortunately contributed to a lack of boundaries in many. I totally agree with that. The perpetrator thought he was just letting off steam. That refers to our Trouser case. How did this come to light? Well, all the cases are reported, so they've actually gone to tribunal. So we, as employment lawyers, get, you know, that they become part of our precedent bank, and how we advise people going forward based on cases that have occurred. It's very much a developing area of law. Finally, after 10, 12 years of social media, people are finally, I think it's finally becoming a criminal, it's a crime to troll. Certainly, that's always been the case with hate crimes and racially motivated and that kind of thing. But they're finally thinking about legislating, and I think that will also be the case on a civil level as well, which will help us an awful lot, because it's so rife. Everybody uses social media, and no one's totally clear on where they stand. So keep a review on it, keep an eye on it. It's very much an emerging area of law, and you can always ask us with any questions. You've got our details, so please feel free to give us a call or give us an email. I think we've covered everything. Is that it? Kelly, is there anything you want to add?
I would suggest, as Rosalind's made the point, that you can go to your body. So if you're part of an association or a member of a large networking group and you pay a subscription, they may well have policies and procedures already available to you to download. However, if you do want expert advice to make sure you're producing the right policies, obviously you can approach us for that advice.
Yeah. So this webinar has been recorded, so if you want to listen to it again, I'm sure you don't, but if you do, or if you want to pass it on, then by all means, sorry, is there one more thing? Somebody's also asked, why don't organisations prohibit personal phones during work hours? I think you have to be careful with that, because, for example, my daughter goes to nursery and I have my phone with me at all times. I take it into meetings, I take it everywhere, because if she's ill, I need to pick her up. And I think in this diverse workforce, there's a lot of working mothers, a lot of working fathers, and people do need to have that connection. I think you're right. It can lead to such a lack of productivity being on WhatsApp all the time, having multiple conversations, and it can lead to errors. I think you can reduce phone use. You just have to be careful that it wasn't indirect discrimination. The reason I say that is, if you have a general practice which seems neutral, i.e. not having work phones during whatever hours, but that this affects, say, women in particular, because women have, well, have to be careful. It's been generally accepted that women have more responsibility for childcare. That's in case law in the tribunal. So if women need their phones, like I've just said, to be in contact with nurseries, that could potentially be an indirectly discriminatory practice. So if you, yes, you can limit use, but you would just need to be careful about how you did it. Somebody said, will we get a copy of the slides? Yes, you can. We will, yeah. We'll email those to you if you'd like them. And like I said, the recording is available should you want to pass it on or listen again. I think that's...
I was just going to mobile phone use. I would suggest that you consider looking, if you don't enforce work mobiles, and that you don't offer work mobiles, consider having some kind of very clear process about why you should be using phones, such as bring your own device. Yes. I know that some people within the business can't actually afford to invest in business phones, so appropriate use of your personal mobile for work purposes should be in place. I know of some businesses that if you're going to use your own device, they do suggest what you shouldn't download in terms of apps and stuff, because they can obviously cause a lot of problems in terms of what that app can access. So I agree with Jane. Think about the use of the mobile phone, but also to protect yourself, think about possibly having a very simple policy about what's acceptable use when you are bringing your own device to work.
Just guidelines. Oh, finally, one more thing. If you want to tweet us at Gelbergs and
at CBX UK.
CBX UK, and please use the hashtag Secure2017. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, and hope to meet you in person at some point as well. Okay, bye-bye.